There is a scene in Season 8, Episode 20, of Regular Show called The Ice Tape, which aired on November 3rd, 2016, where Pops watches a recording of himself as a child. The tape is old. The image flickers, and the child on the screen is laughing, completely unaware that he is the most powerful being in the universe, completely unaware that he has been born to fight, completely unaware that every cycle of existence has ended with his death. The child does not know any of this. He is just happy. The camera holds on the adult Pops watching the child Pops, and the distance between the two of them is the entire tragedy of the show. That is not a children's cartoon moment. That is the most existentially devastating image Regular Show ever produced. The thing about Pops Millard is that he should not work as a character. On paper, he is a cartoon billionaire with a lollipop-shaped head who giggles at butterflies and does not understand how money works. He is the broad-stroke comedy relief in a show already built on absurdity, the least likely vessel for philosophical weight in a cast that already includes an immortal yeti, a sentient gumball machine, and a ghost whose best friend is a man named Muscle Man, the character you expect to deliver a sight gag and then recede into the background while the actual protagonists carry the plot. Real quick, subscribing keeps videos like this coming, and it costs nothing. Now let us continue. For the first 6 seasons of Regular Show, that is more or less what happened. Pops shows up. Pops says something charmingly out of touch. Pops goes back to his room in the house. The camera follows Mordecai and Rigby because they are the ones with problems, and Pops is the one without any. Except that is not true. Pops has the biggest problem on the show. Not the biggest emotional problem. Not the biggest relationship problem. The biggest existential problem in the history of the show's universe. A problem so large that it makes Mordecai's romantic fumbling and Rigby's arrested development look like scheduling conflicts. He just does not know it yet. And that not knowing is the engine of his tragedy. Because every kind thing he does, every butterfly he watches, every piano key he presses, every time he says good show and means it, he is doing it inside a grace period he does not realize is finite. Before examining the cosmic dimensions of Pop's character, it is worth spending time with the version of him that existed before the mythology. The early Pops, the Pops of seasons 1 through 6, because that Pops is not a lesser version. He is the foundation on which the cosmic version is built. And without the foundation, the building collapses. The character originated from J.G. Quintel's student film, The Naive Man from Lollyland, which Quintel produced at CalArts in 2005. The short is exactly what it sounds like. A man with a lollipop head wanders through a world that operates on rules he has never been taught, surrounded by people whose motivations baffle him and whose cruelties seem to arrive from nowhere. Quintel made the film while studying character animation, and the sensibility is already fully formed. The naive man is not stupid. He is not slow. He is operating on a different frequency than the world around him, and the comedy comes from the dissonance between his internal logic, which is gentle and sincere, and the external logic of a world that rewards cynicism and punishes openness. What Quintel understood, even as a student, was that this dissonance is not just funny. It is tragic. And the tragedy is not that the naive man fails to understand the world. The tragedy is that the world fails to deserve his understanding. When Quintel brought the character into Regular Show 5 years later, that fundamental dynamic remained intact. But the context changed. Pops was no longer alone in a hostile world. He was embedded in a community, a workplace, a family of sorts, and that embedding gave his naivety a social dimension it had not possessed in the short film. In the short, the naive man wandered. In the show, Pops belong. He has a room in the house. He has colleagues who tolerate his eccentricities and, gradually, come to depend on them. He has a father, complicated and distant, but present. He has a daily life, a routine, a place in a small community that functions as a family, even when its members would deny it. And belonging changes everything about what his innocence means. Innocence in isolation is simply a lack of experience. Innocence within a community is a choice, whether conscious or not, to maintain openness in the face of evidence that the world does not always reward it. A man with a lollipop head wanders through a world he does not understand, experiencing everything with wide-eyed delight and no comprehension of danger. Quintel has said in interviews that the character was designed to be purely innocent, a figure so removed from cynicism that the world around him becomes funnier by contrast. When the character was imported into regular show 5 years later, the design philosophy remained the same. Pops exists to be kind in a world that does not reward kindness, to be gentle in a world that escalates everything into violence, and to be happy in a world that runs on anxiety. These qualities, in any other show, would make him a supporting player at best, a mascot at worst. Regular show made them the foundation of its most ambitious character arc. The naivety deserves careful examination, because it is the quality that makes everything else about Pops possible, and the quality that the final season most dramatically recontextualizes. In the early seasons, Pop's naivety is played for straightforward comedy. He does not understand modern technology. He does not understand social convention. He does not understand sarcasm, competition, or the basic economic reality that things cost money. He calls every successful outcome a good show, with the enthusiasm of someone who has never encountered a bad one. He approaches strangers with the trust of a golden retriever and the vocabulary of a Victorian gentleman. And the comedy works because the contrast between Pop's worldview and the actual world is enormous, and the gap between the two is where the jokes live. But the show, even in its earliest episodes, treats the naivety with more respect than the surface comedy suggests. Pops is naive, but he is not stupid. He does not fail to understand the world because he lacks the capacity for understanding. He fails to understand the world because the world does not make sense on the terms he is using, and his terms, kindness, trust, delight, are not wrong. They are simply insufficient for navigating a reality that operates primarily on self-interest, competition, and the management of scarce resources. Pops' framework is not inferior to the world's framework. It is incompatible with it, and the incompatibility is the source of both the comedy and the tragedy, because a framework built on kindness will always fail in a world built on competition. But the failure of the kind framework does not prove the competitive framework correct. It just proves that the competitive framework is dominant. Dominance is not the same as truth. The show understands this distinction, and it threads it through Pop's character with a subtlety that rewards careful viewing. Every time Pops' naivety gets him into trouble, every time his trust is exploited, or his kindness is taken advantage of, the show does not punish him for being naive. It punishes the world for being unkind. The moral weight falls on the exploiter, not the exploited. The show never suggests that Pops should learn to be less trusting. It never frames his openness as a lesson that needs correcting. Other shows would use these moments to teach a character to be more guarded, to build walls, to develop the healthy skepticism that modern life seems to require. Regular show refuses this lesson. It refuses to teach Pops to be less kind, because teaching kindness out of someone is not education. It is damage. And the consistent placement of that moral weight is the show's quiet argument that Pops' worldview, however impractical, is the correct one, the one that the world should be built to accommodate, rather than the one that needs to be cured. For 6 seasons, that is enough. Pops is the warm center of a chaotic show, and his warmth is not passive. It radiates outward in ways the other characters depend on without acknowledging. When Mordecai and Rigby trash the house, Pops does not yell. When Benson threatens to fire everyone, and Benson threatens to fire everyone roughly once per episode across the show's entire 261 episode run, Pops diffuses the tension with a non sequitur that is too sincere to be dismissed. When Muscle Man goes too far with a joke, Pops laughs anyway. Not because the joke is funny, but because laughter is the only response he knows, and the laughter changes the temperature of the room. There is an episode in season 2 called Dizzy, which aired on January 24th, 2011, where Pops is tasked with giving a speech and becomes so anxious that he physically cannot stand upright. The episode is played for comedy, and the comedy works because the show's voice actors deliver Pop's physical comedy with pitch-perfect timing. But underneath the comedy is a detail that becomes more significant in retrospect, a detail that the writers may or may not have intended as foreshadowing, but that the final season would retroactively transform into prophecy. Pops' anxiety is not about public speaking. It is about being seen. He is terrified of the moment when people look at him and expect something, because expectations require a version of yourself that you can control, and Pops cannot control anything about himself. His kindness is automatic. His naivety is structural. His happiness is reflexive. And the idea that someone might look at him and see through those things to whatever is underneath them is the source of a panic that the episode frames as slapstick, but that the later seasons would reveal as prophetic. In Really Real Wrestling, Season 2, Episode 20, which aired on May 16th, 2011, Pops enters a wrestling match because he genuinely believes that wrestling is a cooperative endeavor, that the point is for both participants to have fun. He does not understand competition. He does not understand that one person wins and the other loses. And the episode plays this as comedy, but the philosophical implication is substantial. Pops exists outside the binary of winning and losing because his framework for understanding the world does not include opposition. There is no antagonist in Pops' worldview. There are only people he has not yet befriended. That framework would be tested, strained, and ultimately vindicated by the finale, where the ultimate antagonist, Anti-Pops, is defeated not through opposition, but through the friendship Pops offers him. The wrestling episode is a thesis statement disguised as a joke. Pops does not know how to fight. He only knows how to embrace. He enters the ring expecting cooperation and finds violence. And the violence is real, not cartoon violence played for laughs, but genuine physical aggression, directed at someone who did not consent to receiving it. And his response to the violence is not fear or aggression, but confusion. The pure, crystalline confusion. The genuine, uncomprehending confusion of someone who cannot understand why another person would want to cause pain. That confusion is not a character flaw. It is a philosophical position, and the show treats it as such, even when it is also treating it as comedy. And the show, across 8 seasons, argues that the embrace is stronger than the punch, not in the immediate, practical, win the fight sense. In the long term, change the terms of engagement sense. The punch ends a fight. The embrace ends the need to fight. The distinction would take 8 seasons to demonstrate, but the seed is planted here, in a wrestling ring, in a comedy episode, in the 2nd season of a show that most viewers did not take seriously, and that was, even then, building towards something extraordinary. He is the one character who never yells, never schemes, never manipulates. He is the emotional thermostat of the park house, the presence that keeps the temperature livable even when everyone else is generating heat. There is a recurring pattern in the early seasons that is easy to overlook and becomes impossible to ignore once you notice it. Whenever the park crew faces a crisis, and they face a crisis in nearly every episode, Pops is the character who de-escalates, not through strategy, not through intervention, through presence. He walks into a room where people are shouting, and the shouting softens, not because anyone is performing politeness for his benefit, but because his sincerity is contagious in a way that the other characters would never admit, but consistently demonstrate. Pops enters a room, and the emotional weather changes. The temperature drops, the volume lowered, the urgency fades, and the characters who were just at each other's throats find themselves unable to continue the fight. Not because the fight was resolved, but because the energy required to fight in front of someone who genuinely does not understand fighting is more than anyone can sustain. You cannot maintain genuine anger in the presence of someone who genuinely does not understand anger. The emotion loses its energy because the audience for the emotion, the person who is supposed to be affected by it, is not receiving it. Pops does not absorb anger. He simply does not have the receptor for it. The anger passes through him and dissipates, and the room calms down. This is not a minor character function. This is the structural role that makes the show possible. Without Pops, the park house is a pressure cooker with no release valve. Benson's rage would escalate unchecked. Mordecai and Rigby's irresponsibility would meet no gentleness. Muscle Man's aggression would find no softness. The show needs a character who exists outside the economy of conflict. And Pops is that character. He does not participate in the conflict because conflict requires 2 parties who understand the stakes. And Pops does not understand stakes. He only understands people. And his understanding of people, limited as it is in some dimensions, is unlimited in the one dimension that matters. He sees everyone as worthy of kindness. Everyone, without exception, without condition, without the requirement that they earn it or deserve it or return it. His kindness is not transactional. It is atmospheric. You do not notice it until it is gone, and then you notice nothing else. There is a moment in Season 3, Episode 16, Skips versus Technology, which aired on February 6th, 2012, where the park crew is dealing with a technological problem that Skips, for once, cannot solve. The tension in the room is palpable. Mordecai is frustrated. Rigby is panicking. Benson is on the verge of another meltdown, and Pops is there, in the background, not contributing to the solution because he does not understand the technology, but also not contributing to the panic. His presence in the room is a stabilizing force that no one acknowledges but everyone benefits from. You have known people like this. Not the loudest person in the room, not the most competent in that, not the one you would call if you needed a problem solved efficiently, but the one whose absence, if they were suddenly gone, would change the temperature of everything. The person who holds a space open for patience in an environment that would otherwise collapse into urgency and blame. That is Pops. That is what he does, episode after episode, for 261 episodes, without the show ever stopping to give him credit for it. If you removed Pops from that scene, the emotional temperature would spike. The frustration would escalate faster. The resolution would come with more collateral damage. Pops does not fix the problem. He prevents the problem from breaking the people trying to fix it. That is not comic relief. That is emotional infrastructure. And the show builds an enormous amount of its tonal stability on that infrastructure without ever drawing attention to it. His kindness exists in the room the way oxygen exists in the room, available to everyone, consumed by whoever needs it, replenished without effort. And this is where the early Pops and the cosmic Pops converge, where the comedy character and the existential character turn out to be the same person viewed from different distances. Up close, Pops is funny. From a distance, Pops is devastating. The laughter looks different when you understand what it is standing in front of. And the show, by moving the camera gradually from close-up to wide shot across 8 seasons, performs a trick that is unique in animated television. It transforms the viewer's experience of the character without transforming the character himself. The show does not change Pops. It changes you. It changes how you see him. It changes the lens through which you interpret his kindness, his laughter, his naive delight. And the change in lens is permanent. You cannot go back to seeing Pops as a simple comedy character once you have seen the cosmic version. The two images overlay each other, the funny old man and the ancient cosmic being, and neither one cancels the other. They coexist, and the coexistence is what makes him one of the most complex characters in the history of animation. Not because he contains multitudes in the Walt Whitman sense, but because the same qualities read differently depending on the distance from which you view them. And the show controls the distance with the precision of a master cinematographer. Pops is always Pops. Your distance from him changes, and the change in distance is the show's most powerful storytelling tool, more powerful than any plot twist or mythology reveal, because the change happens inside the viewer rather than on the screen. While Mordecai spirals over Margaret and then CJ, while Rigby refuses to grow up, while Benson vibrates with suppressed rage, Pops simply exists. He waters his plant. He reads his book. He laughs at jokes that are not funny, because his happiness does not depend on the quality of the joke. It depends on the act of laughing itself. The piano deserves mention. Pops plays the piano in several episodes, and the show treats his playing not as a skill, but as an expression of his interior life. The music is not technically impressive. It is emotionally transparent. Pops plays the piano the way he does everything else, with complete sincerity and no self-consciousness. And the music that comes out is the music of someone who has never learned to hide what they feel. The notes are simple, the melodies are gentle, and the effect is disproportionate to the complexity, because complexity is not what makes music moving. Honesty is what makes music moving. And Pops is the most honest musician in the show, not because he plays well, but because he plays without a single note of performance. He is not playing for an audience. He is playing for the air, for the room, for the simple joy of hearing a note follow another note in a sequence that pleases him. He is playing because the music is inside him, and the piano is the only way he knows to let it out. And the music, like everything about Pops, becomes different once you know the full story. The melodies he plays are gentle, simple, almost childlike. But in the later seasons, knowing what Pops is, knowing the cosmic burden he carries without awareness. The simplicity of the music becomes poignant. He is reaching for the simplest form of beauty available to him, because simplicity is what his nature required. The music does not need to be complex. It needs to be true. And the truth of a simple melody played by someone who means every note is worth more than any virtuosic performance played by someone performing for applause. There are viewers who watched regular show for 8 seasons and never thought twice about Pops. He was the funny background character, the one with the lollipop head, the one who said good show. He was part of the furniture of the show, present in every episode, but central to few. And his consistency was so reliable that it became invisible. You stopped noticing Pops the way you stopped noticing a heartbeat. It is always there. It sustains everything, and you do not think about it until it stops, and the show makes you notice. In the final season, episode by episode, the show pulls Pops from the background into the foreground, and the shift is disorienting because the character who was always there, always reliable, always warm, is suddenly revealed to be the most important person in the room, and the audience must recalibrate their entire understanding of the show around a character they had been taking for granted. The recalibration is uncomfortable because it mirrors a real experience. You take someone for granted. You assume they will always be there. And then something happens that reveals their centrality to your life. And the revelation is accompanied by a guilt that is specific and unavoidable. The guilt of not having noticed sooner, of not having paid closer attention, of not having been grateful enough for the heartbeat while it was still beating. The show uses this guilt. It weaponizes it, gently but effectively, against the audience. And the weaponization serves a purpose beyond narrative impact. It teaches the audience something about their own lives, about the people they take for granted, about the quiet presences that sustain them without acknowledgement. Pops is the friend who always picks up the phone. Pops is the neighbor who always waves. Pops is the person in your life whose consistency made them invisible and whose absence would make them irreplaceable. And the show is asking you, through the delayed revelation of Pops' importance, to consider whether you have your own Pops. Someone whose value you have not yet recognized. Someone whose departure would leave a gap that no other shape could fill. This is the show operating on a level that most animated series never attempt. It is not just telling a story about a character. It is using the story to change how the audience relates to the people in their lives. It is using fiction to produce a real-world recalibration of attention. A shift in how you see the quiet people, the kind people, the people who do not demand your attention, but deserve it. The show cannot make you call that person, but it can make you aware that you should. It can plant the seed of attention that might, in the days following the viewing, produce a gesture of recognition, a phone call, a visit, a moment where you look at someone you have been taking for granted and see them, really see them, the way the show finally sees Pops in its final season. And the awareness is a gift that persists after the credits roll. Because the awareness is not about Pop. The awareness is about whoever Pops reminds you of. And everyone has a Pops. Everyone has someone in their life whose kindness is so consistent that it has become invisible, whose presence is so reliable that it has become background, whose value will only become fully apparent when it is no longer available. The show asks you to notice that person now, while the noticing can still be expressed, while the gratitude can still be delivered to a living person rather than to a statue in a park. Every moment in the final season where Pops is in danger, every moment where his vulnerability is exposed, is sharpened by the audience's awareness that they did not appreciate him sufficiently during the first 7 seasons. The danger feels worse because the potential loss feels personal. You are not just watching a character die. You are watching a character you did not value enough begin to slip away. And the slipping is a rebuke as much as it is a tragedy. And then season 7 happened. And then season 8 happened. And everything you thought you understood about this character collapses into something so much larger and so much sadder that the earlier seasons become unwatchable in the same way. You will never look at Pops giggling at a butterfly the same way again once you know what the butterfly is distracting him from. The existential dread of Pops is not something the show announces. It does not arrive in a single episode with a title card and a dramatic score. It seeps in. It accumulates. It builds across the final 2 seasons with the slow inevitability of a tide. each episode adding a detail, each detail adding weight, until the accumulated weight becomes unbearable, and you realize that the show has been building toward this specific feeling for years. The dread is architectural. It is designed into the structure of the narrative, and the structure does not reveal itself until you are already inside it. The existential dread of Pops is not that he is destined to die. Everyone in every story is destined for that. The dread is that he is destined to die the same death, in the same fight, against the same enemy, in an infinite loop that he cannot escape, and that every moment of happiness he has ever experienced is a brief pause in a cycle of cosmic violence that has been repeating for 14 billion years. Let that settle for a moment. 14 billion years. That is approximately the age of the universe, the entire span of cosmic history from the initial expansion of spacetime to the formation of galaxies, to the cooling of stars, to the emergence of life on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. All of it, every single moment of it, is a brief intermission in a war between two brothers. The show never flinches from this scale. It does not soften it with humor or undercut it with irony. It presents the information with the same calm sincerity that defines Pops himself. And the effect is devastating, precisely because it is delivered without dramatic emphasis. You are watching a cartoon about park employees, and the cartoon is telling you, without raising its voice, that everything you have ever known or loved or experience exists inside a pause between punches. The stars above you are scenic decoration in a battlefield. The evolution of consciousness, the invention of language, the development of art and philosophy and love and grief, all of it happened during a commercial break in a cosmic fight. And Pops, the gentle man with the lollipop head who laughs at butterflies, is one of the fighters. The show is telling you that the universe itself exists as a byproduct of the conflict between Pops and his twin brother, Anti-Pops. Every time they fight, the universe resets. Every time it resets, it plays out differently in its details, but identically in its conclusion. Pops is born. Pops is kind. Pops discovers his destiny. Pops fights. Pops dies. The universe restarts. The child on the tape laughs again. The philosophical framework here is not subtle, and it is not accidental. The show is deploying, whether consciously or through the intuitive logic of its mythology, a version of Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence, the thought experiment Nietzsche introduced in The Gay Science in 1882, and expanded in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The concept asks you to imagine that your life, in every detail, will repeat infinitely. Every joy, every suffering, every meaningless Tuesday afternoon. The same sequence, forever. Nietzsche posed this as a test of character. If the thought of eternal recurrence fills you with despair, your life is not being lived well. If it fills you with affirmation, if you can say yes to the repetition, then you have achieved what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate. Pops fails this test, at least at first, not because he is weak, but because his version of eternal recurrence is not a thought experiment. It is his literal biography. He does not get to imagine the repetition. He lives it. And the show, remarkably, across a network known for Teen Titans Go and Clarence and the lighter end of animated comedy, does not use this as a cool piece of mythology or a lore dump for the wiki. It uses it as the engine of genuine emotional devastation, because the character who experiences the repetition is the one character in the show who is least equipped to handle it. Pops is not a warrior. He is not a strategist. He is not even particularly brave. Not in the traditional sense. He is kind. That is his entire skill set. And the universe keeps putting him in a situation where kindness is not enough. There is another dimension to the eternal recurrence that the show explores, and it is the dimension that separates Pops' version from Nietzsche's original thought experiment. In Nietzsche's version, you are the same person each time. You make the same choices. You live the same life. The recurrence is perfect. But in regular show's version, Pops is different each time. The universe changes its details with each reset. The park crew changes. The circumstances change. Pop's personality may shift in subtle ways across cycles. The only constant is the fight. The only constant is the ending, which means that Pops gets to be different, gets to experience different joy and different relationships and different versions of kindness, but the destination is always the same. The journey varies, the conclusion does not. This is, in some ways, worse than Nietzsche's version. If the journey were identical each time, you could find comfort in the pattern. You could learn to love the repetition, because there would be nothing to compare it to. But if every cycle gives you something different to love, something new to cherish, something unique to grieve, then every cycle increases the amount of loss without offering any increase in the ability to process it. Each version of Pops loses something no other version had. Each cycle gives him different friend, different moment, different butterfly, and each cycle takes them all away. The grief accumulates, even if the memory does not. The weight carries forward, even if the specifics do not. And the vague, unplaceable sadness that the early season Pops sometimes exhibits. The moments where his smile dims for no apparent reason. The moments where he stares out the window at something only he can see take on a new meaning in this light. He is not sad about anything specific. He is carrying a sadness that predates his current existence. A sadness that is cosmic in origin and personal in effect. And he does not know where it comes from because the memory was erased, but the feeling was not. This is the show's most sophisticated philosophical idea, and it is delivered without a single word of exposition. The idea that emotion can outlast the memory of its cause, that you can carry grief from a life you do not remember living, that the body or the soul or whatever animates Pops retains the residue of 14 billion years of loss, even when the conscious mind has been reset to zero. It is a version of Carl Jung's collective unconscious applied to a single character. The idea that there is a layer of experience beneath the personal that is transpersonal, that transcends individual biography, and that manifests as feelings without narrative, as sadness without story, as a longing for something you cannot name because it belongs to a version of you that no longer exists. Consider the structure of his arc across the final 2 seasons. In Pop's Favorite Planet, Season 7, Episode 31, which aired on June 2nd, 2016, Pops visits a planet he remembers loving, and the episode treats this as a sweet, slightly melancholy adventure. But in retrospect, the melancholy is not slight at all. Pops remembers the planet because he has been there before, not in a previous vacation, in a previous cycle of existence. The planet is a remnant of a universe that no longer exists, a piece of a reality that was erased when the last fight between Pops and anti-Pops ended in mutual annihilation and the cosmos started over. Pops does not know this yet. The audience does not know this yet, but the show knows. And the warmth of the episode is undercut by a sadness that only becomes visible on rewatch. This is what the show does with Pops across seasons 7 and 8. And it does it with a patience that is unusual for animated television, let alone a show on Cartoon Network. The reveal does not arrive in a single exposition dump. It arrives in layers, each layer adding weight to the one before, each episode making the previous episodes sadder in retrospect, until the entire series becomes a different show when viewed from the other end. It takes a character whose defining quality is innocence, and slowly reveals that the innocence is not a personality trait. It is a coping mechanism. Pops is not naive because he does not understand the world. He is naive because understanding the world would destroy him. And some part of him, perhaps the cosmic part, the part that has lived through 14 billion years of cycles, knows this. The innocence is a shield. The laughter is a wall. The butterflies are a distraction. And behind the wall, behind the laughter, behind the gentle voice and the childlike delight is a being who has died more times than any character in any animated series in history and has no memory of any of it except a vague, persistent sadness that he cannot explain and that the show, brilliantly, never asks him to. There is a concept in existentialist philosophy called thrownness, coined by Martin Heidegger in Being and Time, published in 1927. Thrownness describes the condition of finding yourself already existing in a world you did not choose, in circumstances you did not select, with a history you did not write. You are thrown into existence, and you must make meaning from where you land. Pops is the most thrown character in animation history. He is thrown into a park he did not build, a family he was adopted into, a species he does not belong to, a body that is not his original form, a destiny he never consented to, and a cycle of death and rebirth that he cannot opt out of. He is thrown further than any character has a right to be thrown, and yet he lands softly every time, because his response to thrownness is not anxiety or despair. It is gratitude. He is grateful to be here. He is grateful that the morning came. He is grateful for the butterflies and the piano and the friends and the small daily pleasures of a life that he does not know is temporary and cyclical and ultimately meaningless in the cosmic sense. A cup of tea in the morning, the sound of birds outside the window of the park house, the way sunlight moves across the floor of his room in the late afternoon, the satisfaction of saying something that makes someone else smile. These are the things Pops treasures, and the show takes them seriously. It does not treat his appreciation of small pleasures as naive or childish. It treats it as evidence of a character who has, without knowing it, solved a problem that philosophy has been wrestling with for millennia. How do you live a meaningful life in a universe that does not guarantee meaning? You pay attention. You notice the tea. You watch the birds. You let the sunlight move across the floor without trying to stop it, or own it, or make it last longer than it lasts. His gratitude is not informed by philosophy. It does not arrive through argument or deliberation, or the careful weighing of evidence for and against optimism. It is not the gratitude of someone who has thought carefully about the nature of existence and decided to be positive. You know the type. You have met them. They have read the books, attended the retreat, practiced the mindfulness exercise, and arrived at gratitude through a disciplined process of cognitive restructuring. Their gratitude is admirable, but it is also effortful. You can see the machinery behind it if you look closely enough. Pop's gratitude has no machinery. It is not the output of a process. It is not the conclusion of an argument. It is the starting condition. And this is where the show does something genuinely unsettling, because it asks you to sit with a question that most philosophical traditions would rather avoid. What happens when the starting condition is good, but the universe is not? What happens when someone begins from a position of pure, unreflective gratitude and then encounters a reality that does not reciprocate? The conventional narrative answer is that the person either hardens or breaks. They learn the truth about the world and adjust accordingly, becoming either cynical or tragic. The show refuses both options. Pops encounters suffering. He encounters cruelty. He encounters the revelation that he was built to die in a cosmic war he never chose. And his gratitude does not waver, not because he does not understand what he has learned, but because his gratitude was never conditional on the universe being fair. It was never a response to good circumstances. It was an orientation, a direction, a way of facing the world that persists regardless of what the world presents. It is the gratitude of a golden retriever who wakes up each morning astonished to discover that the world still exists, and that the world still contains treats and walks and people who will scratch behind its ears. It is pre-rational gratitude. It is gratitude that lives in the body rather than in the mind. And the show argues, with increasing conviction across 8 seasons, that pre-rational gratitude is the most honest kind, because it is not contaminated by the thoughts that typically poison adult happiness. The comparisons, the ambitions, the awareness of what you lack rather than what you have. And that gratitude, that stubborn, irrational, beautiful gratitude in the face of a universe that is structured specifically to destroy him, is the existential argument the show is making. The argument is this: meaning does not have to be permanent to be real. The butterflies that Pops watches will be erased when the universe resets. The friendships he has built will be erased. The park will be erased. His own memories will be erased. Everything he has ever loved will be returned to nothing. And the nothing will give rise to a new everything. And the new everything will contain a new Pops who will love new butterflies who will also be erased. The cycle is closed. There is no exit. And the show argues, through the simple fact of Pops continuing to be kind despite all of this, that the absence of permanence does not require the absence of meaning. This is Albert Camus, and the show knows it. Camus wrote in The Myth of Sisyphus, published in 1942, about a man condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. Every time the boulder reaches the top, it rolls back down. The task is meaningless. The repetition is infinite. And Camus concludes the essay with one of the most famous lines in philosophy: "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." The argument is that the struggle itself, the act of pushing despite the futility, is enough to fill a heart. The meaning is in the pushing, not in the summit. Pops is Sisyphus with a lollipop head. His boulder is anti-Pops. His hill is the universe. His push is kindness. And the show does not state this comparison explicitly, because the show trusts its audience far more than a Cartoon Network show typically does. Far more than most prestige dramas trust their audiences. It trusts you to feel the parallel without being told about it. It trusts you to carry the emotional weight without having it narrated. It trusts you to recognize that the laughter. It trusts you to recognize that the laughter is not obliviousness, but the specific, deliberate joy of someone who has chosen to be happy despite having every reason not to be. And here is where the show goes further than Camus. Camus imagined Sisyphus happy at the bottom of the hill, in the moment between the boulder's descent and the next push, the brief interval where the labor pauses and the consciousness is free. But Pops does not have interval. Pops is pushing all the time. His kindness is not something he does between the hard moments. It is something he does during the hard moments, through the hard moments, in spite of the hard moments. There is no bottom of the hill for Pop. There is only the hill and the push and the choice to smile while pushing. And the show, across 8 seasons, makes the Camus argument not through philosophical dialogue, but through the accumulated weight of watching a kind person be kind in a world that does not deserve it. You do not need to know Camus to feel what the show is doing. You just need to watch Pops laugh at a joke that is not funny, and recognize that the laughter is an act of defiance against a universe that has given him every reason to stop laughing. The question of whether we should imagine Pops happy is not a thought experiment for the audience. It is an emotional demand. The show has shown you his happiness for 8 seasons. It has shown you the laughter, the butterflies, the piano playing, the small daily joys that constitute his life. And now it tells you that all of those joys existed on a foundation of cosmic tragedy that Pops himself did not know about. Were the joys still real? Was the happiness genuine if the person experiencing it did not have the full picture? Is ignorance of suffering the same as the absence of suffering? The show's answer, delivered through the cumulative weight of 8 seasons, rather than through any single line of dialogue, is yes. The joys were real. The happiness was genuine. The butterflies were beautiful, even though the person watching them was marked for death. The ignorance did not make the experience false. It made the experience innocent. And the innocence is not a lesser form of experience. It is a different one, and the show honors it by never suggesting that Pops would have been better off knowing sooner. The reveal of Pops' true identity as Mega Cranus, the embodiment of pure good from the planet Lollyland, arrives in the final season like a detonation. The show had been building toward it with increasing intensity from the end of season 7 onward, but the reveal itself, when it comes in the ice tape and the episodes that follow, does something remarkable. It does not make Pops more interesting by making him more powerful. It makes him more tragic by making his kindness cosmic. Before the reveal, Pops is kind because that is who he is. After the reveal, Pops is kind because that is what he was made to be. The distinction matters enormously. If your kindness is a choice, it is a virtue. If your kindness is a design specification, it is a function. And the show grapples with this distinction in a way that would be ambitious for an adult drama, let alone a Cartoon Network show about a blue jay and a raccoon. Is Pops good because he chooses to be good? Or is he good because he was literally constructed as the embodiment of good? If his goodness is a property of his design, rather than a product of his will, does it have moral weight? This is a version of the problem of moral luck that philosophers like Thomas Nagel and Bernard Williams have grappled with since the 1970s. The question of whether we deserve praise for qualities we did not choose to possess and cannot choose to discard. Pops did not choose kindness the way a person chooses to volunteer at a shelter. He was made kind the way the sun was made hot. The quality is intrinsic. It is not earned. And the show asks, through the architecture of its final arc, whether intrinsic goodness still counts, whether a kindness you cannot help but offer is still a gift. If his goodness is innate, is it still admirable? If he cannot help being kind, does his kindness still count? These are not questions the show asks explicitly, because the show does not deal in exposition, but they are questions the show raises through the structure of its final arc, where Pops must learn to fight, must learn to be something other than kind, must learn to deploy violence in service of love, and must ultimately decide whether the cycle that defines his existence is something to be fought against or embraced. The show's answer, arrived at through action rather than exposition, is that intrinsic goodness counts if it is expressed through choice. Pops is made good, but the hug is not made. The hug is chosen. And the choice is what transforms the intrinsic quality into a moral act. You cannot choose your nature, but you can choose what to do with it. And the moment of that doing, the moment where nature meets decision, is where moral weight enters the picture. This is a remarkably sophisticated philosophical position for any show to take. And the fact that Regular Show takes it through a character with a lollipop head on a network aimed at children does not diminish its sophistication. If anything, the delivery system amplifies the impact, because you absorb the philosophy before you recognize it as philosophy. The way you absorb a song's melody before you analyze its structure. The show teaches through feeling, not argument. And the feeling arrives with a force that argument alone could never achieve. This is why the show works as a sleep essay. Not because the content is soporific, but because the emotional register is warm. The show holds you the way Pops holds Anti-Pops in the final scene. It does not grab you. It does not jolt you. It does not demand your attention through shock or spectacle. It wraps its argument around you like a blanket. And the argument is that kindness matters, that gentleness has power, that the sweetest person in the room might be the strongest person in the room, that the person you dismissed as a background character might be the protagonist of a story too large for you to see. And you absorb the argument through your skin as much as through your ears, because the argument is as much a feeling as it is a proposition. And the feeling, once it enters you, does not leave. It stays the way Pops' statue stays in the park. It becomes part of the landscape of your emotional memory, a fixed point that the seasons change around, but that does not change itself. The training montage that occurs across the final episodes of Season 8 is, on its surface, a standard cartoon arc. The gentle character must become strong to face the villain. But beneath the surface, the training montage is an existential crisis, disguised as action sequence. Pops does not want to fight. Fighting is the opposite of everything he is, and the show treats his reluctance not as cowardice, but as philosophical consistency. Pops resists violence because violence is the mechanism of the cycle. Every previous version of Pops fought Anti-Pops with force, and every fight ended in mutual destruction and universal reset. The violence did not solve anything. It perpetuated the problem. Pops intuits this, even before he fully understands the cycle. And his refusal to fight is not weakness. It is the first stirring of the idea that will ultimately save the universe. The training episodes depict Pops learning to punch, to kick, to defend himself, to channel his cosmic energy into physical force. And the show does something unusual with these sequences. It makes them uncomfortable. Pops learning to fight does not feel triumphant. It feels wrong. The audience has spent 7.5 seasons watching a character who has never raised his voice, and now the show is putting boxing gloves on him and asking him to hit things, and every punch feels like a betrayal of the character the audience fell in love with. The show wants you to feel that discomfort. The discomfort is the argument. Violence is wrong for Pops, not because violence is always wrong. The show is not making a pacifist argument, but because Pops using violence is a capitulation to the cycle's term, a surrender to the logic of opposition that has defined and doomed every previous iteration, an acceptance that the only language the universe speaks is force. And the show is building toward the moment when Pops refuses to speak that language and invents a new one. The Dream Warrior Season 8, Episode 4, which aired on October 1st, 2016, is perhaps the single most important episode in Pop's entire arc, and it is the one that most explicitly grapples with his resistance to his warrior destiny. The episode opens with Pops in training, attempting to develop the combat abilities that his role as the Chosen One demands, and he is failing. Not because he lacks the power. The show has already established that his power is immense, potentially limitless, but because he lacks the willingness. Every time he is asked to channel aggression, to strike with intent, to treat another being as an obstacle to be overcome, something in him refuses. The refusal is not cowardice. It is not weakness. It is a philosophical objection expressed through the body rather than through words. Pops cannot articulate why he will not fight, because the reason lives deeper than language. It lives in the same place where his kindness lived, in the foundational layer of his personality that existed before he knew about cosmic wars and eternal recurrence and the obligation to destroy his brother. The episode understands this. It does not treat Pops' resistance as a problem to be solved through better training or stronger motivation. It treats it as a genuine dilemma, a conflict between what Pops is and what Pops must do that has no clean resolution. The show had spent 7 seasons building a character whose defining trait was gentleness, and now, in the 8th season, it was asking that character to become a weapon. The tension is not narrative, it is moral. The episode title itself is a contradiction. Pops is supposed to be the warrior, the champion who fights anti-Pops and saves existence. But the dream part of the title suggests that the warrior identity is not his waking self. It is something he must access through an altered state, something that exists in him, but that he does not inhabit naturally. The warrior is inside Pops, the way anger is inside a patient person, present but dormant, available but unpreferred. And this is something the show understands about violence that most action narratives do not. The capacity for violence is not the opposite of gentleness. It is contained within gentleness. The gentlest people you have ever met are not gentle because they lack the ability to be otherwise. They are gentle because they have chosen, consciously or unconsciously, not to exercise a capacity they possess. Pops possesses the capacity to destroy. The show makes this clear repeatedly in the final season, showing flashes of power that dwarf anything else in the regular show universe. He could obliterate anti-Pops. He could end the cycle through sheer force. The power is there, waiting to be used the way a loaded weapon waits in a drawer, functional and patient and indifferent to morality. And the show treats the activation of that dormant warrior not as an awakening, but as a compromise, a necessary diminishment of the character's essential nature, in service of a task that his essential nature cannot accomplish. Except it can. That is the twist. That is the entire point of the finale. The essential nature can accomplish the task. The warrior was never necessary. The kindness was always enough. The show spends the final season convincing both Pops and the audience that he must become something else to win, and then reveals that the something else was a distraction, that the version of Pops who laughs at butterflies and does not understand wrestling was the most powerful version all along. The training was a red herring. The hug was the answer from the beginning, because here is what happens in the finale. In a regular epic final battle, the series finale that aired on January 16th, 2017, Pops does not defeat Anti-Pops by fighting him. He defeats him by hugging him. Consider what the show is doing here. It has spent an entire season building toward a confrontation. It has trained its protagonist. It has raised the stakes to universal annihilation. It has established that previous iterations of this fight, stretching back billions of years, have all ended in mutual destruction. Every storytelling convention demands a climactic battle, where the hero overcomes the villain through superior power or superior will. The show rejects all of it. The show says that the hero overcomes the villain by refusing to treat him as a villain. The hug is not a weapon. It is not a tactic. It is not a clever subversion. It is exactly what it appears to be, an act of unconditional love directed at someone who has never received it. And the sincerity of that act is what breaks the cycle that billions of years of combat never could. He wraps his arms around his twin brother, the embodiment of pure evil, the being who has destroyed the universe as many times as Pops has tried to save it. And he holds on. He holds on the way a parent holds a child who is trying to run into traffic, with a grip that is not about dominance, but about refusal to let go, about the conviction that holding is more important than anything the held person might want to do. And then he flies them both into the sun. The hug is not a weapon. It is not a strategy. It is not the final move in a cosmic chess game. It is a choice, the simplest and most radical choice the show has ever depicted. It is the choice to break the cycle, not with greater force, but with a different kind of force entirely. A force that the cycle was not designed to account for. Every previous iteration ended in combat. This iteration ends in embrace. And the embrace works precisely because it is something the cycle has never seen before. The cycle is a machine. It processes inputs and produces outputs. Violence is an input it knows. Force is an input it knows. The embrace is not an input the machine was built to process. And the machine breaks because the embrace is not a different form of force. It is a different category entirely. It is care. Pops does not overpower anti-Pops. He changes the terms of the engagement. He introduces a variable, love, that the equation was not built to process, and the equation breaks. And anti-Pops, in that moment, held by his brother, suspended above the surface of the sun, does something that 14 billion years of existence have never produced. He hugs back. The embodiment of pure evil, held by the embodiment of pure good, in the light of a dying sun, repents. The repentance is not earned through argument or demonstration or the accumulation of evidence. It is earned through contact, through the physical reality of being held by someone who cares about you. Not because he is defeated, because he is, for the first time in 14 billion years, touched. Someone cared about him, not about defeating him, not about neutralizing the threat he posed. Someone cared about him. Anti-Pops, Malum Cranus, the embodiment of everything destructive and nihilistic in the universe. Someone looked at the worst thing in existence and saw a brother. Someone held the worst thing in existence and refused to let go. And the holding was enough to undo the hatred. 14 billion years of hatred dissolved by a single act of care, because the hatred was never the point. The hatred was the default. It was the path of least resistance in a universe structured around opposition. Good versus evil. Light versus dark. Push versus pull. The binary was the default. And the cycle continued because nobody had ever stepped outside the binary and tried something else. Nobody had ever said, what if the opposite of evil is not good? What if the opposite of evil is love? And love is not the same as good. Good opposes evil. Love holds it. Good fights evil. Love embraces it. Good tries to win. Love tries to connect. And the connection, the embrace, the hug, breaks the cycle because the cycle was built for opposition. And the hug is not opposition. It is union, and union is the one thing the cycle of opposition cannot survive. This is the philosophical climax of the show, and the word climax does not do it justice, because the moment is quiet. There is no explosion of light. There is no triumphant score. There is a hug, and a flight, and a sun, and then silence. The devastation is not that Pops died. The devastation is that he dies happy, that the final expression on his face is not fear or pain, but peace, that the being who was born to fight dies holding rather than hitting, and that the peace he finds in the final moment is the same peace he found watching butterflies in the park, which means that the butterflies were always preparing him for this, that every small moment of joy was a rehearsal for the final one. The show is devastating, not because it is sad, but because it is hopeful in a way that feels earned. The show spent 8 seasons demonstrating that Pops' kindness was genuine, that his innocence was not ignorance, but a different kind of knowledge, that his laughter was not obliviousness, but resistance. And in the final moment, that kindness, that same kindness that seemed so inadequate for so long, is the only thing in the universe strong enough to break an infinite cycle of destruction. There is a concept in Buddhist philosophy called mudita, which is sometimes translated as sympathetic joy, the capacity to find happiness in the happiness of others. Pops possesses mudita to a degree that borders on the superhuman, which, given his cosmic nature, is appropriate. His joy is not self-centered. It is not acquisitive. It does not require ownership or accumulation. It is about the existence of pleasure itself, about the sheer improbability of beauty existing at all, the fact that there are butterflies at all, that something as unnecessary and as beautiful as a butterfly was produced by a universe that had no obligation to produce beauty, the fact that music exists at all, that the vibration of air can produce an emotional response that has no survival value and no evolutionary purpose, and no reason to exist, except that it does. The fact that the park is green, and the sky is blue, and his friends are alive, and the morning came again, and the coffee is warm, and the piano is waiting. His appreciation is total. It misses nothing. It takes nothing for granted. And the completeness of his appreciation is what makes the sacrifice so expensive. Because a person who appreciates nothing sacrifices nothing by dying. A person who appreciates everything sacrifices everything. His happiness is not acquisitive, it is appreciative. And the show argues, across its entire run, that appreciative happiness is more durable than acquisitive happiness because it does not depend on gaining anything. It depends only on noticing what is already there. This is the quality that makes Pop's sacrifice so powerful. He is not giving up a life he resented. He is giving up a life he loved. Every butterfly, every piano note, every conversation with Mordecai and Rigby, every cup of tea in the park house, he is surrendering all of it. And the surrender costs him everything precisely because he appreciated everything. A character who did not love life would sacrifice it easily. A character who loved life the way Pops did sacrifices it at an incalculable cost. And the willingness to bear that cost is what transforms the sacrifice from an act of duty into an act of love. The dread, the existential dread that the title of this video references, is not resolved by the finale. It is reframed. The dread is real. The cycle was real. The 14 billion years of repetition were real. But the fact that kindness could break what violence could not suggests that the dread was never the whole story. The dread was the surface, the visible pattern of an infinite loop of destruction and rebirth that seemed to define the shape of existence itself. Underneath the dread was a possibility that nobody had tried, because nobody believed in it. And the character who tried it was the one character simple enough, kind enough, naive enough to believe it might work. There is a moment after the sacrifice that the show handles with the kind of restraint that separates great storytelling from merely effective storytelling. The montage that closes the show. It runs for several minutes, and it covers years. The park crew goes home. Mordecai becomes a painter. Rigby starts a family with Eileen. Benson finds love. Muscle Man and Starla raise their children. Skips continues, as he always has, the immortal witness to mortal lives. Thomas disappears into whatever life awaits a former Russian spy. The montage shows birthdays and holidays and quiet afternoon. It shows the accumulation of ordinary time, the kind of time that Pops valued more than anyone and experienced less of than anyone deserved. It shows the park in different seasons. The leaves changing, the snow falling, the grass returning in spring, the cycle of the natural world continuing without the cosmic cycle that once threatened to consume it. The animation shifts slightly during the montage, becoming warmer, softer, more impressionistic, as if the show itself is relaxing now that the burden of its mythology has been resolved. And through all of it, through every frame of ordinary beauty and hard-won peace, one absence defines everything. Pops is not there. The park has a statue of him. The friends gather around it. Not often enough to call it a ritual, but often enough to call it a habit. They remember him. They tell stories about him to people who never met him. And the stories always emphasize the same things: the kindness, the laughter, the inexplicable joy. But the days continue without him. And the show does not pretend that the absence is not painful. The statue is not a replacement. It is a reminder. And the difference between a replacement and a reminder is the difference between forgetting and carrying. A replacement fills the space. A reminder preserves the shape of what used to fill it. The park crew does not try to fill the space Pops left. They carry it. They carry it into their new lives, into their families, into the quiet moments when they remember what it felt like to be young and reckless and employed at a park run by a man who never stopped believing the world was good. The memories are not a substitute. Pops is gone. And the world is better because he existed. And the world is worse because he is not in it anymore. And both of those things are true at the same time. That dual truth, that the world is simultaneously better and worse because of Pops. That his existence made everything brighter, and his absence makes everything dimmer, is the existential condition the show leaves you with. Meaning and loss are not opposites. They are the same thing viewed from different angles. Pops meant something precisely because he could be lost. The butterflies meant something precisely because they were temporary. The friendships meant something precisely because they would end. If the cycle had continued forever, if Pops had been functionally immortal through the mechanism of eternal return. If the universe had kept resetting, and Pops had kept being reborn into new parks with new friends and new butterflies, none of it would have mattered. Not because the experiences were not real, but because the experiences would have been infinite. An infinite experience has no scarcity, and without scarcity, there is no value. And without value, there is no meaning. The cycle promised Pops eternity. The eternity was the trap. And the breaking of the cycle, the sacrifice that ended the recurrence, was also the act that made every previous cycle retroactively meaningful, because the final cycle was the one that counted, the one where the choice was made, the one where the repetition stopped, and the singular, unrepeatable consequence arrived. The meaning required the mortality. The joy required the grief. The butterflies required the sun that would destroy them. And the love required the loss. Because love that costs nothing is not love. It is preference. Love is what you feel for something you know you will lose and choose to hold anyway. Pops held everything. Every friendship, every small joy, every morning at the park, every cup of tea, every moment of laughter with people who loved him. He held all of it knowing, in the end, that he would have to let go. And the holding is the point, not the outcome, not the victory, not the cosmic resolution. The holding. There is a concept in Buddhist philosophy called mudita, which is sometimes translated as sympathetic joy, the ability to feel genuine happiness at the happiness of others without needing to possess that happiness yourself. Pops embodies mudita more completely than any character in Western animation. He does not need to be the center of the joy. He does not need to be the reason for the laughter. He needs only to be present for it, to witness it, to let it pass through him the way light passes through glass, unchained and undiminished. And the show argues, in its final episode, that this capacity for unselfish joy is not a weakness. It is the most powerful force in the universe, more powerful than anti-Pop's nihilism, more powerful than the cycle of destruction that has governed existence for eons, more powerful than the cosmic machinery that demands a fight to the death every time the universe resets. Pop's joy does not fight the darkness, it absorbs it. It holds it the way he holds everything else, without condition, without resentment, without the need for the darkness to justify itself, or explain itself, or promise to change. He held it knowing, in the end, that he would have to let go. And the letting go, the final letting go, the flight into the sun, was not a defeat. It was the completion of a love so total that it included its own ending. The show aired for 8 seasons, from September 6th, 2010, to January 16th, 2017. 261 episodes. Pops appeared in nearly all of them. He said, "Good show." He laughed at things that were not funny. He watered his plants. He played the piano. He wore the same outfit. He lived in the same house. He worked at the same park. And across all of those ordinary, repetitive, unremarkable episodes, the show was quietly, patiently, invisibly building the argument that ordinary, repetitive, unremarkable life, the kind of life that fills no highlight reels and generates no viral moments and produces nothing that the world would call extraordinary, is the most valuable thing in the universe, because it is the thing that a cosmic being with the power to reset reality would choose to protect with his life. Pops chose the ordinary. He chose the park. He chose the lawn and the coffee and the arguments about nothing and the Monday mornings and the Tuesday afternoons, and the weekends that blurred together. He chose all of it, and the choice was the point. And the point was that the ordinary is not a lesser form of existence. It is the form of existence that is worth dying for. This is where the show's philosophy becomes genuinely profound, where it moves beyond the cartoon framework and enters territory that most adult dramas do not have the courage or the patience to explore. The question the show is ultimately asking is not whether Pops should have sacrificed himself. The question is whether the sacrifice was necessary for the meaning to exist, whether the ordinary days of the park crew would have been as precious if they were not bought with a specific, named, beloved person's death. The answer the show implies, and it implies rather than states because the show respects ambiguity more than most prestige television, is yes. The sacrifice made the ordinary days sacred. Not valuable, sacred. There is a difference. Valuable things can be replaced. Sacred things cannot. Soren Kierkegaard writing in Either/Or in 1843, argued that the aesthetic life, the life lived for pleasure and beauty and immediate experience, is ultimately hollow because it avoids commitment, because it skims the surface of existence without plunging into the depth where meaning resides. The ethical life, the life lived for duty and principle, is more substantial but still incomplete. The religious life, the life lived in relation to the infinite, is the only one that achieves genuine meaning, and it achieves meaning through what Kierkegaard called the leap of faith, the willingness to commit to something you cannot prove, to believe in something you cannot see, to love something you know you will lose. Pops makes the leap of faith, and the leap is literal. He flies into the sun. There is no safety net, no backup plan, no cosmic insurance policy. He does not know that the hug will work. He does not know that anti-pops will respond. He does not know that the cycle will break. He hugs his brother because hugging is what he knows how to do. And the leap of faith is not a calculated risk. It is an act of love in the absence of evidence. And the absence of evidence is what makes it faith rather than strategy. The show could have ended with Pops winning a fight. It would have been satisfying. The audience had been watching for 8 seasons. They were invested. They wanted the villain defeated and the hero triumphant. A well-choreographed battle sequence with a decisive finishing blow would have provided catharsis, would have sent the audience home happy, would have given the show a clean ending that required no interpretation. The audience was ready for it. The training montage had prepared them for a battle. Instead, the show gave them a hug and a flight into the sun, and the emotional impact was greater precisely because it was unexpected, precisely because it defied the logic of the cycle, and the logic of the genre, and the logic of everything the audience had been trained to expect from a cartoon finale. Consider what this says about the show's understanding of existential dread, and about the show's faith in its audience to receive a message that most entertainment is too afraid to deliver. The dread is real. The meaninglessness is real. The cycle is real. But the response to the dread is not to fight harder within the system. The response is to introduce something the system cannot process, something outside the parameter, something the algorithm of cosmic recurrence was never programmed to encounter. Love, kindness, gentleness, the willingness to hold rather than to hit, the willingness to be destroyed rather than to destroy, the willingness to sacrifice rather than to fight. These are not naive responses. They are the most radical responses possible within the framework the show has established. They are radical because they refuse the terms of the debate. The cycle says fight. Pops says hold. The cycle says destroy. Pops says embrace. The cycle says this is how it has always been. Pops says this is how it will be different. The radicalism is in the refusal, and the refusal is powered not by strength, but by a kindness so fundamental that it cannot imagine any other response. They are the responses that the cycle, built on violence and opposition, has no framework to absorb. And they work precisely because they are outside the framework. This is what makes Pops a great character and not merely a sweet one. Sweetness is easy. Sweetness requires no risk. You make a character smile. You give them a gentle voice. You let them do no harm, and the audience will like them. But greatness requires something more than likability. It requires the capacity to carry meaning, to embody an argument, to make the audience feel something they did not know they needed to feel. Pops is great because his sweetness is not decorative. It is structural. It is the load-bearing wall of the show's entire philosophical architecture. And when the wall holds, when the kindness proves sufficient in the final moment, the relief the audience feels is not the relief of a happy ending. It is the relief of a thesis proven true. Sweet characters are easy to write. You make them kind. You make them innocent. You put them in situations where their kindness is tested and their innocence is preserved. That is a children's story. What regular show does with Pops is something else entirely. It makes him kind, makes him innocent, reveals that his kindness and innocence are literally cosmic properties that he was designed to possess, and then asks whether designed kindness has the same value as chosen kindness. It puts him in a situation where his kindness is not just tested, but weaponized, where the only way to save the universe is to be kind at the exact moment when the universe is demanding violence, and then it lets him die. That is not a children's story. That is an existentialist argument about the nature of goodness, about the relationship between design and choice, about the possibility of breaking patterns that seem eternal, about the radical power of gentleness in a universe structured around force, about the proposition that the most naive person in the room might be carrying the most sophisticated truth, and that the truth is simply this: be kind. Be kind when the universe asks for violence. Be kind when the cycle demands repetition. Be kind when the rational response is despair. Be kind because kindness is the only response that the system of despair cannot absorb, cannot process, cannot neutralize. Be kind because kindness is the bug in the code of a universe built on opposition. And the bug, when activated at the right moment by the right person, crashes the entire system and replaces it with something the code never anticipated. Something better. Something that looks, from the right angle, like a park on a sunny day where a man with a lollipop head is watching butterflies and finding the whole thing absolutely wonderful. And it is delivered through a character with a lollipop for a head, on a channel that also airs Teen Titans Go. And that delivery system is part of the argument. Because if the argument only worked when delivered through prestige drama, with a premium cable budget and a serious-faced protagonist, it would be a weaker argument. The fact that it works through Pops, through a character who giggles and does not understand currency and has a head shaped like candy, proves that the argument is stronger than its container. The truth does not need a serious face. It needs a genuine one. And Pops' face, absurd as it is the most genuine thing on the show. The early seasons of regular show contain dozens of small moments that become unbearable once you know the full story. There is a scene in season 3 where Pops is sitting in the living room while the other characters argue about something trivial, a bet or a challenge, or a broken piece of equipment, and Pops is not participating in the argument. He is sitting to one side, quietly content, watching his friends be themselves. The camera does not emphasize him. He is in the background, part of the composition, but not part of the conflict. And on first viewing, the moment is unremarkable. On rewatch, after you know what Pops is, after you know what is coming, the moment becomes a portrait of someone savoring a reality that is about to be taken from them. Pops is watching his friends the way someone watches a sunset, with the awareness, conscious or not, that the beauty is temporary. The loneliness of Pops is something the show handles with remarkable restraint. He is surrounded by friends. He lives in a house full of people. He has a father figure in Mr. Maillard, however distant and often dismissive that figure may be. But the loneliness is not social. It is ontological. Pops is alone in the way that no other character on the show is alone, because no other character shares his condition. Mordecai can talk to Rigby about his problem. Benson can commiserate with Skips about the burdens of management, but Pops cannot explain to anyone what it feels like to be a cosmic being trapped in a lollipop body, experiencing joy that he suspects might not be real, living a life that he increasingly suspects has happened before. The show depicts this loneliness not through dialogue, but through composition. Watch the episodes where Pops is in the background of a group scene. He is always slightly apart. The animators positioned him this way consistently, whether by design or by instinct, and the effect is cumulative. Over 8 seasons of watching Pops stand slightly to the left of the group, slightly behind the main action, slightly out of step with the rhythm of the conversation, you develop a sense of his separateness that words alone could not create. Not excluded, not rejected, just separate. In the way that someone carrying a secret is always separate from the people who do not know the secret. And the secret Pops carries is the heaviest in the show. It is the secret of his own nature, the knowledge that he is not what he appears to be, that his happiness might be a design feature rather than a genuine emotion, that everything he loves will end and begin again, and end again, and begin again, and end again, forever. Mr. Maillard's relationship with Pops adds another layer to the existential dimension, and it is a layer that the show builds with a patience that rewards close attention. Mr. Maillard appears in numerous episodes across the show's run, spanning from his first significant appearance in Season 2's Dizzy, which aired on January 24th, 2011, through the series finale in January 2017. His presence is never comfortable. He is loud where Pops is quiet. He is demanding where Pops is accommodating. He is anchored in the material world, in property values and business operation and the practical management of a public park, while Pops floats somewhere above all of that, untethered from the concerns that consume his father's attention. The dynamic between them is one of the show's most carefully constructed relationships, and it rewards patience. In the early seasons, Mr. Maillard reads as a simple antagonist within the family unit, the disapproving father whose standards Pops can never meet. But the show layers additional information slowly, revealing across seasons that Mr. Maillard is not Pops's biological father, that he adopted Pops, that he knew, perhaps from the beginning, what Pops was and what Pops would eventually have to face. And that knowledge reframes every interaction, every harsh word, every dismissive gesture, every moment where Mr. Maillard seemed to be pushing Pops away was potentially a preparation, an attempt to toughen a son he knew was walking towards something terrible. The show never confirms this reading definitively. It leaves the ambiguity intact. But the ambiguity is the point, because it mirrors the real experience of parenting, where the child rarely understands the parent's motivations until long after the formative years have ended. In almost every one, he is dismissive of Pop. He forgets his name. He belittles his interest. He treats his sensitivity as a defect rather than a quality. The pattern is consistent enough to be read as simple cruelty. And for 6 seasons, many viewers read it exactly that way, Mr. Maillard is the bad father. Pops is the neglected son. The dynamic is familiar enough to require no further analysis. But the later seasons complicate this reading in ways that transform Mr. Maillard from a flat antagonist into a tragic figure in his own right. Mr. Maillard is not cruel. He is terrified. And the terror expresses itself as cruelty because Mr. Maillard does not have the emotional vocabulary to express terror directly. He is a man, or whatever species he belongs to, who has spent decades preparing for a catastrophe he cannot prevent, caring for a being he cannot protect, and loving a son he cannot be honest with. The weight of that situation would crush anyone. Mr. Maillard is crushed. He is just crushed quietly, and the quiet is what the audience misreads as indifferent. There is a reading of Mr. Maillard's behavior that goes even deeper. If he shows Pops too much affection, Pops will become attached. If Pops becomes attached, the eventual separation will be more painful. If the separation is more painful, the grief might interfere with Pop's ability to do what needs to be done when the time comes. Mr. Maillard's coldness is not just a coping mechanism. It is a strategic choice, a deliberate emotional distance maintained for the purpose of reducing the damage that the inevitable goodbye will cause. He loves Pops enough to deny Pops the full experience of being loved, because the full experience of being loved would make the loss unbearable, and the loss is coming whether anyone is ready for it or not. This is, by any measure, one of the most complex and emotionally sophisticated parent-child dynamics in animated television. It is built entirely through behavior rather than dialogue. Mr. Maillard never explains himself. He never delivers a monologue about his motives. He just acts, consistently, across dozens of episodes, in a pattern that reads as cruelty, until the context arrives and the cruelty reveals itself as a different shape entirely. The shape is love. The shape was always love. The audience just did not have the vocabulary to read it until the final season provided one. And this is the show's deepest achievement with the Pop storyline. It teaches you to read love in unfamiliar shapes. It shows you a father who expresses love through distance and teaches you that distance can be a form of protection. It shows you a son who expresses love through naivety and teaches you that naivety can be a form of wisdom. It shows you a sacrifice that looks like destruction and teaches you that destruction can be a form of creation. The show rearranges the emotional vocabulary of its audience, quietly, over the course of 8 seasons, and the rearrangement leaves the audience better equipped to recognize love in the places where it hides, in the silences and the distances and the roughnesses and the absences that the conventional emotional vocabulary would dismiss as the opposite of love. Mr. Maillard adopted Pops. He took a being of cosmic significance, a creature from another world whose very existence was tied to the fate of the universe, and he raised him on Earth, in a park, surrounded by ordinary people doing ordinary things. He built the park as a refuge for him, a place where Pops could exist in something approaching normalcy, despite being an alien being of cosmic significance. Think about that for a moment. Mr. Maillard built an entire park, hired an entire staff, created an entire institutional structure, all to give one person a place to be normal. The park is not a business. It is a therapeutic environment disguised as a business. The job of mowing lawns and maintaining grounds is not the point. The point is giving Pops a context in which his existence makes sense, a framework of daily routines and social interactions that provides the structure his cosmic nature lacks. The park is a coping mechanism the size of a property. It is the largest act of love in the show, and it is performed by the character who seems least capable of love. And Mr. Maillard is not kind about it. He is gruff, dismissive, often openly contemptuous of Pop's sensitivity and naivety. But the show gradually reveals that Mr. Maillard's harshness is itself a form of love, a desperate attempt to prepare Pops for a destiny that Mr. Maillard knows about and Pops does not. Mr. Maillard is harsh because he is afraid. He knows what Pops is. He knows what is coming. And he cannot tell Pops because telling him would end the innocence. And the innocence is the only protection Pops has against the knowledge of his own cosmic tragedy. So Mr. Maillard is mean. He calls Pops by the wrong name. He dismisses his interests. He pushes him away when Pops reaches for affection. And every instance of coldness is an act of love expressed through the only vocabulary Mr. Maillard possesses, which is the vocabulary of a man who has spent decades trying to protect someone from a truth that will eventually destroy everything. There is a moment in the later seasons where Mr. Maillard's composure cracks, where the mask slips, and you see the fear underneath the gruffness. And the moment is so brief that you might miss it if you are not watching carefully. He looks at Pops, and there is something in his expression that is not contempt. It is grief. It is the preemptive grief of a father who knows he is going to lose his son and cannot say so. And the grief has been there the entire time, underneath every dismissal, every forgotten name, every cold shoulder. Mr. Maillard has been grieving for 8 seasons. The audience just did not recognize it until the context arrived. That parent-child dynamic, the parent who withholds information to preserve innocence, the child who interprets the withholding as rejection, is a universal human experience compressed into the mythological framework of a cartoon. Every parent withholds something. Every child misreads the withholding. The specifics are different, but the structure is the same. And the show earns the emotional weight of the dynamic by grounding the cosmic mythology in recognizable relational patterns that any viewer can identify with, regardless of whether they have ever heard of Lollyland or eternal recurrence or the embodiment of pure good. The cosmic scale is the delivery mechanism. The human scale relationship is the payload. You do not need to understand Lollyland to understand a father who cannot tell his son the truth. You just need to have been a child, or to have raised one. The show's treatment of Pops' relationship with the park crew deserves its own consideration, because the relationships are the mechanism through which the show's philosophy becomes emotionally legible. Pop's friendship with Mordecai and Rigby is the most visible, but it is also the most asymmetric. Mordecai and Rigby treat Pops with affection, but it is the affection you show to an eccentric uncle, warm but slightly condescending, protective but not peer level. They like Pops. They do not take him seriously, and the show uses this asymmetry to devastating effect in the final season, when Mordecai and Rigby must reckon with the fact that the person they treated as a charming oddity is actually the most important being in the universe. That reckoning is not comfortable for them or for the audience. It requires acknowledging that their affection was incomplete, that they saw Pops clearly enough to love him, but not clearly enough to understand him, and that the understanding would have required taking his strangeness seriously, instead of treating it as comedy. The show does not punish Mordecai and Rigby for this. It does not even frame it as a failure. It frames it as a limitation of vision that is inherent in the condition of being finite. You cannot see the cosmic in the ordinary unless the ordinary chooses to reveal its cosmic dimension, and Pops did not choose to reveal it. He did not choose to conceal it either. He simply existed, and the existence was interpreted at the level the interpreters could reach, and the level was love without comprehension, which is, the show suggests, the most common kind of love there is. We love people we do not fully understand. That is the normal condition of love. We love them at the depth we can reach, which is determined by our own capacity for depth rather than by theirs. And the depths we cannot reach remain a mystery. The beautiful, irreducible mystery of another consciousness that we can approach but never fully enter. And the mystery is not a failure of love. It is the condition of love. It is the space inside love where humility lives, the acknowledgement that you will never know the whole person, that your love is based on a partial picture, and that the partiality does not invalidate the love. It makes it honest. You never know the whole person. You know the person you can see, and the seeing is enough for love, even if it is not enough for understanding. It frames it as the inevitable consequence of living alongside someone whose true nature is beyond your comprehension. You love what you can see. You miss what you cannot. And the gap between the two is the gap that makes Pops lonely, even in a house full of friends. Pops' relationship with Skips is different and, in some ways, more poignant. Skips is immortal. He has been alive for centuries. He has seen more of the world than anyone else on the show, and he carries a weight of accumulated loss that the other characters cannot fathom. In Skips, Pops has the closest thing to a peer, someone else who exists outside the normal timescale of human life, someone else for whom the ordinary rhythms of birth and death are not the whole story. But even Skips does not know what Pops is. Even Skips, with his centuries of wisdom, sees Pops as a sweet old man rather than a cosmic being. The show suggests that loneliness is not a function of how many people are around you. It is a function of how many people can see you for what you actually are. And for Pops, that number is 0. Benson's relationship with Pops is defined by institutional obligation rather than emotional intimacy. But the show complicates even this. Benson manages the park. Pop's father owns the park. The power dynamic is inverted in a way that Benson handles by treating Pops with a careful courtesy that never quite becomes warmth. Benson is respectful to Pops because he has to be, and the obligation creates a distance that neither party knows how to close. There are moments where Benson and Pops share genuine connection, where the institutional barrier dissolves, and two people simply exist in the same space with mutual regard. And these moments are among the quietest and most beautiful in the show. Muscle Man's relationship with Pops is the simplest and, paradoxically, the most honest. Muscle Man does not treat Pops differently from how he treats anyone else. He is loud, he is crass, he is inappropriate, and he includes Pops in all of it without modification. He does not soften his behavior for Pops. He does not protect Pops from the coarseness of his personality. And in that refusal to accommodate, there is a respect that the more careful characters do not offer. Muscle Man treats Pops as an adult. This sounds simple, but in the context of the show, it is radical. Every other character modulates their behavior around Pops to some degree. Mordecai softens his sarcasm. Rigby dials back his chaos. Benson suppresses his anger. Even Skips, who is ancient and has seen everything, adjusts his tone when speaking to Pops, as though communicating with someone who requires a gentler frequency. Muscle Man does none of this. He is exactly as crude, as loud, as aggressively himself around Pops as he is around anyone else. His jokes do not change. His volume does not change. His willingness to say exactly what he thinks at exactly the wrong moment does not change. And in that consistency, in that absolute refusal to treat Pops as fragile, there is something that the more careful characters miss. There is the assumption that Pops can take it. That Pops is strong enough to exist in the full, unfiltered reality of another person's personality without breaking. That assumption is itself a form of respect, perhaps the deepest form of respect the show offers, because it is respect for Pop's resilience rather than his sensitivity. He treats him as someone capable of handling the full spectrum of human interaction, and Pops, who is treated by almost everyone else as a delicate creature in need of protection, responds to Muscle Man's roughness with delight, because the roughness is honest, and Pops can always recognize honesty, even when he cannot recognize sarcasm. The delight is not masochistic. It is the delight of being treated as a full person, rather than a fragile object. Muscle Man gives Pops something the other characters do not. He gives him normalcy. He includes him in the crude, loud, unfiltered reality of adult male friendship, without any of the careful editing that the others apply. And the inclusion, rough as it is the most egalitarian act of friendship in the show. High Five Ghost's relationship with Pops is the subtlest in the show. High Five Ghost barely speaks. He is Muscle Man's shadow, his partner, his silent witness. But there are moments, tiny moments, where High Five Ghost and Pops share a frame without dialogue, and the silence between them is not empty. It is companionable. Two of the show's quietest characters existing in the same space, requiring nothing from each other, offering nothing except presence. Those moments are easy to miss. They are also the most accurate depictions of genuine friendship the show ever produces, because genuine friendship is not always conversation. Sometimes it is just being there, quietly, without needing to explain or justify or fill the space with sound. The final 2 seasons transform Pops from the show's least complicated character into its most complicated, and the transformation is achieved not by adding complexity to his personality, but by adding depth to his context. Pops does not change. He is the same kind, gentle, naive being in Season 8 that he was in Season 1. What changes is the meaning of those qualities, and the change in meaning is so total that the character becomes unrecognizable even though nothing about him has been altered. It is like looking at a photograph of a loved one taken before a diagnosis. The person in the photograph is the same person. The smile is the same smile, but the knowledge you carry changes what the smile means, and the photograph can never be innocent again. In Season 1, his kindness is a quirk, a character trait listed alongside his lollipop head and his Victorian mannerism. In Season 8, his kindness is a cosmic force that has failed to save the universe 14 billion times and is about to try one more time. And the viewer who has watched all 8 seasons is now carrying the weight of both readings simultaneously, the quirk and the force, the comedy and the tragedy. And the weight of carrying both is the existential dread of watching the show itself. The dread in the title is the viewer's dread, not Pops. Pops does not experience dread because dread requires the awareness of what you are facing. And Pops' awareness arrives late and is immediately overwhelmed by his determination to be good anyway. The show handles the final revelation with a care that is worth examining closely. When Pops learns the truth about himself, the show does not depict a dramatic breakdown. It does not show him screaming or weeping or collapsing under the weight of the knowledge. It shows him going quiet. It shows him sitting with the information the way you sit with news of a terminal diagnosis, not with hysteria, but with a stillness that is worse than hysteria, because stillness means the information has been absorbed and the person is now living inside it. Pops goes quiet, and the quiet is the most devastating acting the show has ever produced from an animated character, because it is the quiet of someone who has just learned that every happy moment of their life was a pause in an infinite tragedy, and the quiet is how they process that knowledge without letting it destroy the part of them that still knows how to be happy. There is a word for what Pops does in the episodes following the revelation. The word is integration. In Jungian psychology, integration is the process of incorporating shadow material, the repressed, the unknown, the unwanted, into the conscious self without being overwhelmed by it. Pops must integrate the knowledge of his cosmic nature into the self that watches butterflies and plays piano. He must hold both realities simultaneously, the reality of the kind man in the park and the reality of the cosmic being marked for sacrifice, and he must find a way to be both without either one destroying the other. The integration is not painless. There are moments in the final episodes where you can see the strain, where Pop's smile flickers like a candle in a draft, where the effort of maintaining his characteristic joy in the face of cosmic knowledge becomes briefly visible before the joy reasserts itself, and the mask, if it is a mask, if it was ever a mask, settles back into place. But the show suggests that it is not a mask. It suggests that the joy is real, even in the presence of the knowledge, that Pops' happiness after the revelation is not a performance of the happiness he used to feel, but a continuation of it, transformed by awareness, but not destroyed by it. The butterfly is still beautiful. The piano still sounds good. The friends are still worth caring about. The knowledge changes the context of the joy, but not its substance. And the substance is what matters. The raw, unfiltered, embodied experience of being alive and finding it good. Pops finds life good. He finds it good before the revelation, and he finds it good after it. The finding is not dependent on the knowledge. It is dependent on the nature. And the nature, the deep, cosmic, designed-in nature of Pops Maillard, Mega Cranus, the embodiment of pure good, is to find life good, always, under all conditions, including the condition of knowing that life, for him, is about to end. And then Pops comes back. He comes back to himself. He returns to the group. He smiles. He makes a comment that is characteristically out of touch. And the return is not denial. It is a choice. It is Pops choosing, with full knowledge of what he is and what is coming, to be the same person he was before the knowledge arrived. The innocence is gone. The kindness remains. And the kindness, separated from the innocent, becomes something harder and brighter and more valuable than it was before. Because a kindness that persists despite knowledge is a different kind of kindness than a kindness that exists through ignorance. It is an informed kindness, a chosen kindness, and the choice is what gives it the power to break the cycle. The dread belongs to the audience, to the viewer who has watched this character be kind for 8 seasons and now understands that the kindness was always in service of a fight he was never going to win, not through force. The dread is the gap between what the audience knows and what Pops knows, and the gap closes in the finale, when Pops finally understands everything, his identity, his destiny, his death, and responds not with despair, but with a hug. That response, the hug, the flight, the sun, the silence, is the show's answer to existential dread. You cannot beat it. You cannot escape it. You cannot think your way out of it. You can only hold on to something you love and refuse to let go, even when the universe is structured to make letting go the rational choice. Pops holds on, the universe breaks, and the show ends. And the audience is left with the specific, irreducible feeling of having watched someone they love choose to die, so that ordinary life can continue. The lawn will be mowed. The coffee will be made. The sun will rise on a park that no longer contains the person who made it worth visiting. And the ordinariness of what continues is both the tribute and the tragedy, because Pops died for the right of his friends to have boring Tuesdays. And boring Tuesdays are the most precious thing in the universe once you understand what they cost. The show's final image, the statue of Pops in the park, surrounded by the changing seasons, visited by friends who grow older with each cut, is an image that operates on multiple philosophical registers simultaneously. On one register, it is a memorial. A dead person is remembered by the living. On another register, it is an argument about permanence. The statue is permanent. The person it represents was not. The gap between the permanence of the memorial and the impermanence of the memorialized is the gap that every cemetery, every monument, every photograph of someone who is no longer alive asks you to contemplate. The statue will outlast the friends who visit it. The friends will outlast the grief they feel. And the grief will outlast the sharpness of the memory, fading from acute loss into gentle sadness, into something that is not quite sadness and not quite peace, but lives somewhere in between. On a third register, the statue is ironic. Pops, the most dynamic, most alive, most joyful character on the show, is now a stone figure, frozen, immobile, the opposite of everything he was. And the irony is not cruel. It is honest. Memorials always do this. They take the moving and make it still. They take the living and make it permanent. And the permanence is a consolation and a lie, because the permanent version of a person is never the person. It is a shape the person left behind. And the shape is enough to trigger memory, but not enough to substitute for present. The show understands this. It shows the park crew visiting the statue, and it shows them talking, laughing, telling stories. They are not talking to the statue. They are talking to each other about Pops in the presence of the statue. And the distinction matters. The statue is not Pops. The statue is the place where Pops used to be. And the gathering around the absence is what keeps the absence from becoming an emptiness. Grief shared is grief survived. The show demonstrates this without saying it. And the demonstration is more convincing than any statement could be. The park crew does not process their grief through therapy or conversation, or any of the mechanisms that prestige television typically deploys. They process it through presence. They show up. They stand near the statue. They exist in the same space at the same time. And the coexistence is the processing. The grief is not talked through. It is lived through. And the living is enough, because the living is what Pops died to protect. The seasons change around the statue. The show marks time through weather rather than dialogue. And the passing of the seasons is itself a philosophical statement. Spring come, the park is green. Summer come, the park is bright. Fall come, the leaves change. Winter come, the statue is covered in snow. And through it all, the statue does not change. It is the fixed point around which the changing world rotates, and the fixedness of the memorial in the midst of the changing world is the show's final image of Pop's legacy. The idea that some things endure, not because they are permanent, but because the people who remember them refuse to let them be forgotten. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote in Being and Nothingness, published in 1943, that humans are condemned to be free, that the absence of a predetermined essence means we must create our own meaning in a universe that provides none. Pops inverts this. He has a predetermined essence. He is literally the embodiment of good. He is not free in the Sartrean sense because his nature was designed, not chosen. He did not wake up one morning and decide to be good. He did not examine the alternative, weigh the costs and benefits, and conclude that kindness was the optimal strategy. He was made, crafted, destined. His goodness is not an achievement. It is a specification. And this creates a problem that the show takes seriously, even if most viewers experience it only as a vague unease, rather than a fully articulated philosophical question. The problem is this: if Pop's goodness is built in, is it really goodness, or is it just programming? Thomas Nagel wrote about moral luck, the observation that much of what we consider morally praiseworthy or blameworthy is determined by factors entirely outside our control. Where you were born, what genetic predispositions you inherited, which experiences shaped your neural pathways before you were old enough to choose anything. Pops is moral luck taken to its absolute extreme. He is good because the universe made him good. He is kind because the universe made him the embodiment of kindness. There is no struggle in his goodness, no temptation overcome, no dark impulse wrestled into submission. And yet the show insists, through the cumulative weight of 8 seasons of storytelling, that his goodness matters, that it is real, that it counts. The show's answer to the problem of moral luck is not philosophical, it is narrative. It does not argue that designed goodness is equivalent to chosen goodness. Instead, it shows you a character whose designed goodness is tested by circumstances so extreme, so cosmically unfair, so absolutely devastating, that the question of origin becomes irrelevant. Whether Pops chose to be good or was made to be good stops mattering when the cost of being good is everything he has. And yet, the finale presents his final act, the hug, as a genuine choice. Pops chooses to hug Anti-Pop. He is not compelled to. The cycle does not demand it. Every previous cycle ended in combat, which means the cycle expected combat. The hug is a deviation. It is Pops choosing something outside his programming. And the choice, because it is a genuine choice rather than a designed response, because it emerges from the space between nature and expression where freedom lives, is what breaks the pattern. The universe did not anticipate the hug because the universe did not design the hug. The universe designed Pops' goodness. Pops designed the hug. And the hug, because it is Pops' creation rather than the universe's, introduces genuine novelty into a system that had been running on repetition for 14 billion years. Novelty breaks pattern. That is what novelty is. And the novelty of love in a system built on violence is sufficient to shatter the system entirely. This means that Pops' freedom is not the freedom to choose his nature. That freedom was never available to him, just as it is never fully available to any of us, shaped as we are by genetics, environment, culture, and the accumulated weight of every experience we did not choose to have. Pop's freedom is the freedom to express his nature in a way that nobody, not even the universe, anticipated. It is the freedom of interpretation rather than the freedom of creation. He did not create his goodness. He interpreted it. He took the raw material of his cosmic design and expressed it in a way that the design never specified. And the expression, the hug, the choice to hold rather than to hit, was genuinely new, genuinely unprecedented, genuinely free in the only sense of freedom that matters. He is good. He has always been good. He will always be good. But the way he expresses that goodness in the final moment is unprecedented, and the unprecedented quality of it is the source of its power. He is both determined and free. His nature is fixed, but his expression of it is not. He is good without choice, and kind by choice, and the combination produces something that is neither pure determinism nor pure freedom, but a synthesis of both that the show presents as the highest form of moral existence, as the resolution of the free will debate that philosophy has been conducting for millennia, conducted here through a lollipop man flying into the sun with his evil twin in his arm. And the show suggests, in its final moments, that this is enough, that you do not need to choose who you are. You just need to choose how to be who you already are. The nature is given. The expression is earned. The nature says, be good. The expression chooses how. And the how, in the final moment, is a hug and a sun and a silence that contains more love than any word the show has ever spoken. And the choice of how to express the nature you were given, how to inhabit the body you did not select, how to love in the conditions you did not choose, is where meaning lives. It is where it has always lived. It is where it lived for Pops in every small moment of joy across 8 seasons. And it is where it lives for you in every small moment of joy across however many seasons your life contains. And Pops, the most predetermined character in the show, finds the most meaning because he chooses the most radical expression of his given nature and lets the radicalness of the expression redeem the givenness of the nature. This is, finally, the existential dread of Pops resolved. Not eliminated, resolved. The dread remained. The cycle was real. The 14 billion years of death and rebirth were real. The suffering was real. But the resolution, the hug, the flight, the sun is also real. And the resolution does not cancel the dread. It coexists with it. The dread and the resolution occupy the same space, the same character, the same final moment. And the coexistence is what makes the moment unbearable and beautiful at the same time. The show does not promise you that meaning defeats dread. It promises you that meaning can live alongside dread, that the two are not mutually exclusive, that you can be fully aware of the absurdity and the tragedy and the meaninglessness of your condition, and still choose to hug someone, still choose to be kind, still choose to laugh at a butterfly, not because the butterfly solves anything, but because the butterfly is there and you are there, and the overlap of those two facts is enough. There is one more philosophical thread in the Pops arc that deserves attention, and it is the thread that ties everything together. The show asks, across its entire run, whether the present moment has value independent of the future. Pops's present moments are, in the cosmic view, insignificant. They are pauses in a cycle that will erase them. The butterflies will be unmade. The friendships will be dissolved. The park will cease to exist. And yet the show insists, through the accumulated weight of hundreds of episodes of Pops being present, being kind, being happy, that the moments have value, even though they are temporary. The butterfly does not need to be permanent to be beautiful. The friendship does not need to be eternal to be real. The morning does not need to last forever to be worth waking up for. This is the philosophical position known as presentism in some ethical tradition. The idea that the present moment is the only moment that has moral weight, that the past is memory and the future is speculation, and the only arena where action is possible is now. Pops lives in the now with a completeness that the other characters cannot achieve because the other characters are always looking forward or backward, always planning or regretting, always somewhere other than where they are. Pops is always here. He is always present. Watch the early episodes with this framework and you will see it everywhere. When the other characters argue, Pops watches the argument with the attentiveness of someone watching a sunset. When the other characters rush through a task, Pops moves at his own pace, not because he is slow, but because he does not experience urgency the way they do. Urgency requires a relationship with the future that Pops does not have. He does not worry about what comes next because what is happening now is too interesting, too beautiful, too worthy of his full attention. The other characters live in the future. Pops lives in the moment. And the show, across 8 seasons, gradually reveals that the moment is where life actually happens, and the future is where anxiety happens, and the character who lives in the moment is the one who is actually alive, while the characters who live in the future are merely planning to be alive someday. And the show argues, through 8 seasons of accumulated evidence, rather than through any single philosophical speech, that his presence, his radical, total, undivided presence in each moment, is both his greatest vulnerability and his greatest strength. The vulnerability is obvious. A person who is fully present, feels everything. There is no buffer between Pops and his experience. The joy hits him at full force. The sadness hits him at full force. The beauty hits him at full force. He has no ironic distance, no protective cynicism, no emotional armor. He takes everything in and processes none of it through the filters that the other characters use to manage their relationship with reality. The strength is less obvious, but more important. A person who is fully present can act with a directness that planning cannot achieve. Pops does not strategize. He does not calculate outcome. He responds to what is in front of him with whatever his nature provides. And the response, because it is unmediated by thought, is faster and truer than any calculated action could be. The hug in the finale is not a plan. It is not something Pops thought about, weighed the pros and cons of, or deliberated over. It is a response, pure and unmediated. The same kind of response that makes him laugh at a bad joke, or smile at a stranger, or stop to watch a butterfly. And the response works precisely because it is immediate, precisely because it is not strategic, precisely because it comes from the same place that the butterfly watching comes from the same total presence that has defined Pops since the first episode. He is vulnerable because the present is where pain happens. He is strong because the present is where love happens. And the two cannot be separated. You cannot be present for the joy without being present for the grief. Pops accepts both. The acceptance is the philosophy. Go back to the image from the ice tape. The adult Pops watching the child. Pops on the flickering screen. The tape hisses. The image is degraded by time. The child version of Pops fills the frame, laughing at something off camera. And the laughter has the quality of all childhood laughter. Unself-conscious, unironic, complete. The adult Pops watches in silence. His face is not expressionless. It is too full of expression to settle on any single one. There is love in it, and grief, and recognition, and distance, and the specific vertigo of seeing yourself from the outside, of watching a version of yourself that no longer exists, performing a happiness that you can remember but cannot re-enter. And between the two of them, between the laughing child and the quiet adult, between the innocent and the knowing, between the being who does not understand his destiny and the being who has just learned it, is the weight of everything the show has argued across 8 seasons and 261 episodes. The child does not know what he is. He does not know about Lollyland, about anti-Pops, about the cycle, about the 14 billion years, about the fight, about the hug that will end the fight, about the sun that will end the hug. He does not know any of it. He is just laughing, and the adult knows all of it. And the adult's silence is not despair. It is love. It is a specific kind of love that the German language has a word for, and English does not. The Germans call it Sehnsucht, a longing for something you have had and lost, or for something you have never had but can imagine with perfect clarity. Pops watching his younger self is experiencing Sehnsucht for his own innocence, for the version of himself that existed before the knowledge arrived, for the happiness that was genuine precisely because it was uninformed. He does not want the innocence back. He wants to honor it, and the silence is the honoring. It is the love of someone watching a version of themselves that still had the luxury of not knowing, the luxury of happiness without the shadow of knowledge falling across it, and choosing not to grieve the loss of that luxury, because the loss is what made the knowledge possible, and the knowledge is what made the sacrifice possible, and the sacrifice is what made the ordinary days of his friends possible. And the ordinary days are the point, the whole point, the only point that ever mattered. The tape flickers, the child laughs, the adult watches. And if you are listening to this at 2 a.m, in the dark, trying to fall asleep, the image might be the last thing you see before you drift off. A man watching a tape of himself when he was young. A man carrying the weight of the universe in a body shaped like candy. A man who chose to be kind when the universe asked for violence, and whose kindness broke the universe, and whose breaking saved the universe, and whose saving cost the universe the one person who loved it most completely. The tape plays on. The child does not know what he is. The adult does. And the distance between them, which is the distance between innocence and knowledge, between comedy and tragedy, between the first episode and the last, is the entire story, the entire show, the entire existential dread, and the entire existential hope of a character named Pops Maillard, who was born Megacranus, who was the embodiment of pure good, who watched butterflies and played piano and said good show and meant it every time, and who, in the end, held on. The existential dread of Pops is that meaning requires mortality, that love requires loss, that the good you do in the world is inseparable from the fact that you will not be there to see its consequences. It is the dread that every parent feels when they look at a child and understand that the child will grow and change and eventually exist in a world the parent will not see. It is the dread that every artist feels when they create something and release it into a future they cannot control. It is the dread of investment without guaranteed return, of love without guaranteed reciprocation, of effort without guaranteed permanence. It is the fundamental human dread, the awareness of your own finitude. And the show deposits this awareness into the least likely container imaginable and discovers that the container holds it perfectly. But the show argues, through the simplest and kindest character it ever created, that this is not a tragedy. It is the structure of a life worth living. A life without mortality would be a life without urgency. You know this. You have always known it, even if you prefer not to think about it. The reason the sunset moves you is that you will not see every sunset. The reason a conversation with someone you love can feel like the most important thing in the world is that neither of you will have conversations forever. The reason time matters is that it ends. Remove the ending and you remove the mattering. This is not a pessimistic observation. It is the structural truth upon which every meaningful experience is built. Pops understood this, not because someone taught him, but because his situation forced him to live it. He had died before. He would die again. And in between the death, the brief, shining interval of a single life, everything was precious. A love without the possibility of loss would be a love without depth. A kindness offered in a universe where nothing can go wrong would be a kindness without cost. And costless kindness is not kind. It is reflex. It is the automatic output of a system that has never been tested. Pop's kindness is tested. It is tested by the revelation that his existence is a cycle of violence he never chose. It is tested by the discovery that his brother wants to destroy him and everything he loved. It is tested by the knowledge that every previous version of himself, every Pops who came before, in every previous iteration of the universe, lost everything in the end. His kindness survives all of it. Not because he is ignorant of the cost, not anymore, but because he has decided, in the most profound act of free will the show ever depicts, that the cost is worth paying. Pop's kindness cost him everything. That is why it means everything. That is why, when the show ends and the credits roll and you are left in the silence of a room where a cartoon used to be playing, the feeling that remains is not sadness, not primarily, not in the way that sadness demands attention and dominates the room. The feeling is something quieter. It is gratitude. Gratitude that something this improbable exists at all. Gratitude that a team of artists and writers at Cartoon Network took a premise that could have stayed safely in the realm of absurdist comedy and pushed it, slowly, carefully, over 8 seasons, into territory that genuine literature would be proud to occupy. Gratitude that a show about a blue jay and a raccoon and a lollipop man found a way to say something true about what it means to be alive, and said it simply enough that you could hear it, and honestly enough that you could feel it, and quietly enough that you could fall asleep to it. And somewhere, on a tape that flickers and jumps and holds an image of a child who does not know what is coming, the laughter is still playing. The child is still happy. The adult who watches is still watching. And the distance between them, the distance that was always the entire tragedy and the entire beauty of this show, has not closed. It never closes. That is the point. Good show, Pops. Good show. If you found something worth carrying away from this, subscribing helps more than you would think. Thank you for staying. I will see you in the next one.